So it was my hope from yesterday's class that you all have a basic understanding of this concept of modern nationalism. Now, if you did read the book, and I'm going to assume the best, you're a wonderful group of individuals, but you've noticed in the book that they break down several examples of how nations became modern nations. And if I was on your side of the desk, I wouldn't find that very interesting, and I don't think it'd be super fruitful. So instead, I've decided to use the United States, our own country, as a case study on nationalism, bearing in mind other nations have a similar process. And again, there's close to 200 modern nations. But before we get into this, previously on yesterday's class, I gave you my formula on what I consider nationalism. And I likened it to the analogy of baking a cake. You take 8 disparate ingredients, or 6, whatever it takes to make a cake. You blend it together, you bake it, and you have this unified product. Now, if I were to show this list to other historians and history teachers, there's aspects of it they may agree with, others they disagree with. I think it's a fairly decent list based on my experience as a teacher and as a student, so we're going to go with it, okay? But as I tell you the American story, understand that other nations followed a very similar pattern. There's no sequence here. Let's get that out of the way as well. There's no sequential order here. Like a cake, whether I put the flour in first or the eggs in first, it doesn't really matter in the end. Sorry if you're like a really good pastry chef and I stated the wrong thing, but for most of us, I think that holds true. So anyway, number one, for a nation, you need to have borders. So you take America on her birthday, July 4th, 1776, 13 colonies along the Atlantic Ocean. Not a huge nation. Now, America today, we have 48 continental states from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean and 2 states outside of the continental 48. We got really, really big in a fairly short amount of time. So hopefully in your past instruction, your teachers taught you about the Louisiana Purchase and how the Spanish gave up Florida to America, and what happened with Texas and the U.S.-Mexican War and the Gadsden Purchase that gave us the Southwest, and how we got Alaska and Hawaii. But the moral of the story is nations have borders, but borders change. They get bigger, they get smaller. In America's case, obviously a lot bigger. Okay. You need to have unity of the people. To have this common identity, you need to have unity. And if you take a nation, there are times nations are really united. Now, I've been alive during the Challenger blowing up. The country came together. Certainly during 9/11, the country was incredibly unified. When I was in high school, we had Operation Desert Storm. Tremendous unity. The president at the time, President Bush Sr., had an 82% approval rating, if you can imagine that. And then there's times we are divided. Obviously, the Civil War, you can't be much more divided than that when you're killing one another over differences. So I posed the question in class, what causes unity and what causes division? And I've asked this on several occasions. Usually this is the list. A common enemy to hate, that helps. Being attacked, that helps. Common cause to fight for. Strong leadership, propaganda, gatherings and rallies. And then what causes division? Obviously philosophical and religious differences, a lack of leadership. When something helps one group make money and the others lose money, some people see history as a self-interest. Hey, if it's making me money, it's good. If it makes me lose money, it's not so good. A lot of people blame the media, especially in modern times, and then dogmatic thinking. There's one way to do things. I'm not open-minded. So anyway, unity. You have to have unity of a people to create a modern nation. In America's revolution, it took 8 years. It was taxation without representation. England was taking money from us, but we didn't have a say in the matter. And 56 of our founding fathers signed the Declaration of Independence. It was written by Thomas Jefferson. It stated 27 things we had issues with. And at the end of it, we mutually pledged to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. So it took a long time, but it worked. Okay, now another thing that nations have is iconography, and I'm going to give you this quote here. Symbolism is the language of the mysteries. By symbols, men have ever sought to communicate to each other those thoughts which transcend the limitations of language, and you are surrounded by iconography, by flags, by the Nike swoosh on your shoe, if you have a cross around your neck, the U of M yellow M, or the Michigan State Sparty logo, or the Ford blue oval. I could go on and on and on, but iconography surrounds us because it speaks to people probably stronger than words do. So with America, obviously, there's a fun little meme. The most American picture ever taken. You got bald eagles on a McDonald's with a flag and a plane. And Uncle Sam and apple pie and baseball and Iwo Jima and the eagle that I used in this PowerPoint. So nations have iconography, and people can be an iconography. People can serve as that. Now, another thing a nation uses is propaganda, which is an emotional response, because many people have responses at an emotional level, not an intellectual level. Okay, and the propaganda attempts to reach people on that emotional level to get them to move in a direction that you want. So obviously, if I am running a country or I'm running a school, I want unity within that country or school. And propaganda can go either way. But here's positive propaganda. Okay, there's Uncle Sam, hey, I want you to join. This is wonderful. Women, we can do it like the women in Ypsilanti at Willow Run. Built those planes to win World War II. That's local. United we win. We have to work together, teamwork. So this is cool. Okay, this is positive stuff. But propaganda can also be pretty problematic. It can be racist. It can be dehumanizing. And again, I understand Japan was our enemy during World War II, but that's not flying in modern times or equating your enemy to be, an animal or using a racial slur. So propaganda can be problematic as well, okay? Now, here's your public service announcements from your teacher here. Please, 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 please understand this, that wherever you're getting your news, some is straight up news. If you're here in this green box, you're pretty cool. Right here, you're cool. If you're getting stuff out here, especially at the extremes, okay, for example, the Palmer Report or InfoWars, this is not legitimate. This is propaganda. This is not grounded in truth. It's grounded in hooey and nonsense. So let me give you a little more lowbrow example if you don't want this highbrow example. Okay, chocolate and feces are both brown. You don't want one of them around. One of them's cool, one of them's not. Okay, that's my lowbrow example. But again, if you can't tell these apart, okay, here's the chocolate, there's the feces. Okay, if you get that, okay? So it's important that you can discern real news, real facts from propaganda and nonsense, or at least being sharp enough to realize somebody's manipulating me with propaganda. So at least you have a wherewithal to know that. Now, this is to me the hardest part of creating a nation is you need commonalities, especially in America where we come from all over the world, to create this idea that we are all Americans. So you need to have common values. Now, these are taught to school children throughout the country, and I think they're positive. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, justice, equality, diversity, truth, the common good, popular sovereignty, and patriotism. And young people, if they can really buy into this, we can be one nation despite us coming from different parts of the world. Acts of patriotism, standing during the pledge, honoring holidays, putting your flag in front of your house for national holidays, that kind of thing. Here's where it gets a little dicey. National self-identity. There's a lot of debate between how we should present American history. Should we present it like the 1619 Project that's really pretty raw? Says all the bad stuff America did versus some people who want to teach American exceptionalism, that America's the greatest country, we don't do anything wrong. Probably in between these two groups is the truth, okay, coming from an old teacher. But there's a fight for the national self-identity through schools. Language, English. And again, if you come from another country, first thing they do in school is teach you English so we can be on the same page, so we can communicate with each other. Now, this other part, the other, throughout American history, we need to create an enemy, which I think helps into unity and helps say we are not this, okay? So we started off, England was our enemy, then American Indians, the country went after, then Mexicans, then the Confederacy, then the Spanish, Germans twice, the Japanese, communists, during the Cold War, Iraq, during the 90s, terrorist groups during the 21st century, North Korea, as I speak to you. But this is part of a country. You have to have an other, or at least it's super commonplace for a nation to have the other, okay? The other two are pretty simple. The seventh ingredient is music and an anthem, because music, like I'll use Schopenhauer's quote here, the effect of music is so very much more powerful and penetrating than it is that of the other arts. For these others speak only of the shadow, but music of the essence. I think you get that. Music can hit you on a really deep level. Okay, even the slang, as I speak to you, it hits different. I hear that all the time, but it does. It hits different. And for example, here's the Americans during the Olympics, and you can see them being brought to tears by the anthem. So last part, is education social studies teachers. Now, what's the point of these people? Mr. Browning, myself, Mr. Green, the magical musical Mr. Morrow. Bearing in mind, we're pretty new. Math teachers have been around for a long time. Writing teachers have been around for centuries and centuries. We're new. And the point of us, the point of social studies, is to create effective citizens. This bumper sticker was on my car for years and years because the National Council for the Social Studies, our role is to create citizens, meaning part of a nation. So bear in mind, just to get the most minimal level of education in this country, you have to take U.S. history. Now, it used to be, now it's in 5, 8, and 9. The reason why? Grade 5 used to be the common year where people left school, and then as people went to school longer, it was 8th grade. So they wanted U.S. history to be the last year. Now it's commonplace to go to 12th. And then in 11th grade, you have to economics, teach you how to be a good capitalist. 11th grade government, how America works, and then grade 12 civics. It's the only graduation requirement that all 50 states share. So that is the point of us, and that's the point of it's really to increase nationalism and to make citizens, okay? So I threw a lot at you. Hopefully you were in class, but if you weren't, hopefully that gave you a little lay of the land about nationalism. And if you have any questions, please email me or contact a classmate, and I appreciate you watching.